TNKR Media.
Welcome to today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business, presented by FL Montreal. My name is Dan Delmar, along with my co-host, Mike Newton, as always. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Dan, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Today, we're going to talk a bit about the paradigm shift and getting back to work and that whole process. That's just a couple minutes away. But first, let's just take a moment to talk about how interesting our entrepreneur is today. Sarah Lambert of Ora Medical, another young entrepreneur that's incubated in the Centec system here in Montreal. So it's a bit of a public-private partnership backed by research institutes. And this is basically, how could we describe it? It's sort of like the walker of the future. It's a smart aid for physical rehabilitation, and it's a connected device. You get all the AI data points that you would in a normal AI medical device, and it also has along the walker these cushion supports that sort of help your muscles along. It's really a cool product.
Yeah, I mean, the goal ultimately is not to replace the physical therapist, but to actually be an add-on or addition to it. And I think the component of this that I find fascinating is the ability to have remote capacity. As we deal in a world now where remote medicine has become, during COVID, has become just a massive part of all our group plans and everything else that we're dealing with from an insurance perspective. This fits really, really nicely. And as we've said before, right place at the right time for an entrepreneur. It doesn't matter sometimes how good your product is, so long as you find that timing for it. And I think this is a great opportunity, as well as I think the timing has been really, really good.
Yeah, very interesting. So Ora Medical, I'm sure you'll be interested in Sarah. She is a really interesting young entrepreneur, so that's on the way. But first, as usual, news and notes. But this time, Mike, you want to talk a little bit about just the general theme of the return to the office and the change of paradigm, as you put it. So you spoke to your employees in the past couple of weeks about this. What is the latest, in terms of just the mood, I guess, in Montreal workplaces? Obviously, it's going to be a slow return, but we got to get back to the office to some degree.
Yeah. So thanks, Dan. I really want to take this, I think, in a different direction than the return to work or a discussion of COVID and the pandemic. I really want to discuss the change of mindset here that we are experiencing and we will need to experience in order to move forward. I mean, a paradigm, is basically an example or a pattern of something, right? It's the model, it's the routine, and it's things that we have done. Some cases routinely, in other cases, basically by rote. And the paradigm shift basically refers to a major change in a worldview or a concept. We have been working in the office space, and I'm going to talk a little more about the office building and office space because that seems to be a big concern at this point for a lot of people. Is we've been doing this the same way for a long time. Right. I mean, yes, a lot of firms dabbled in flex time and a lot of firms dabbled in some remote work. But, if you go back to the beginning of the pandemic, we were thrown into a forced environment. So I'm not going to say, and I would argue, rather vehemently that the paradigm shift is not COVID. The paradigm shift is not even the change that occurred when we went home, because that was as a result of some kind of forced factor that was outside of our doing. To me, the paradigm shift really challenges the status quo, and it ultimately takes place in a scientific framework. So would you say that, being forced to go home because of a pandemic is a science? No, definitely not. What we do to come out of that and how we are going to change the workspace going forward is and the use of the technology will ultimately be that paradigm shift. And this term was brought about I'm going to sound really nerdy here for a second, but it was brought about by a scientist back in 1962 in the book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. And that's when the first use of the paradigm shift actually found its way into our vernacular and has now become a mainstay in a lot of things. When you look at significant changes in the past on paradigm shifts, you're talking the assembly line. Okay, you're talking about assembling things, one person making a whole piece. Then you change technology, you changed mindset to create an assembly line. Okay, it revolutionized the auto industry. You can go back and say another major paradigm shift was the use of technology and the internet as how we continue to evolve and change and do things. So again, I would argue that COVID itself is not the paradigm shift, but rather the changes that will come out of it. And we all know that any controversial research is perceived as, misguided or a dead end, and skeptics and subject to inquiry. But I think what we're really starting to see here is a change in the way we do work. And as if I bring it back to the question you ask, and how does this affect getting back to work? The reality is we are not going to see a similar workspace that we did before the pandemic, if at all, for a long time. Now, does that mean we no longer need office space? Definitely not. Okay, what it may mean is we may be de-densifying the number of people in office. It may mean that part of the office or team comes in Monday, Tuesday, another group comes in Wednesday, Thursday, but people are still going to need their space. They're still going to be in that exercise. So, where does that take us going forward? It's, how and where we work is being reevaluated, the technology uses of how we're doing it, the HR implications, as Alito will talk to a little bit later, in terms of, the great resignation. Is it really a great resignation, or is it really a great reevaluation or a great repurposing of a lot of technology and those environments? So, as much as I think we all know that the Chicken Little's "the sky is falling" sells, the reality here is I think we're actually on the cusp of something very interesting and very different in the way we're going to look at doing things going forward, and that we should be open-minded and not look at all of this and go, oh, poo-poo, we need to be where we were in 2019. Or to the contrary, say, hey, wait a sec, we're all going to work from home. We all know that everything is a pendulum, right? And it's going to go from everybody must be in the office to nobody's going to be in the office to where do we find that happy medium going forward? And, for the longest time, I have hated the term work-life balance because it's been one of those millennial discussions that to me was always an excuse to not work. I think we're going to start seeing changes like work balance, work location balance, and a whole bunch of other things as we try to accommodate some of the things that Alita will get to later in terms of making sure we're keeping the right employees, not just keeping employees. But if you're going to throw money at people, if you're going to try and retain talent, retain the right people for the right reasons in the right environment.
Okay, that's very interesting, Mike, and I like your thinking, and it's going to be tricky because I think certainly when in my political commentary, if I'm asked, I say, well, what's government supposed to do? And my answer is be more nimble, I think, is the message. It's sometimes it's more severe, sometimes it's less severe, but being more nimble and being able to adapt to the circumstances is I think, something that as Canadians we have to be a little bit more forward thinking on.
Yeah, and I think the key right now is, as we continue to move forward, is this philosophical change away from a lot of business who have gone from a zero tolerance component to this managing risk going forward. COVID is not going to go away overnight. We are going to be living with COVID for some time to come in whatever capacity that may look like. Businesses are really good at managing risk. That's what we thrive on. So now, in order for businesses to go forward, take back that ability to control the environment and now manage risk accordingly, instead of trying to say, I'm going to either protect everybody or I'm going to shut down completely. And, this is where I think government needs to start looking, is how are we all going to live in this environment, and what is this going to look like, and stop stop the environment. I mean, we're sending the kids back. We're sending people out into the schools, into the hospitals. These people are faced with COVID on a regular basis. They're surviving. They're doing things. How do we now get the rest of us up and running and away from that, oh my God, to some form of, hey, let's learn to manage this as we would any other risk in our business.
Okay, yeah, it'll require some adjustments for us all. So we'll get there together, hopefully. Mike, thanks very much. Great commentary. And coming up next, let's get to our profile. Sarah Lambert from a very innovative company. It's called Ora Medical, and a big tech medical company here in Montreal. She is the founder, and it's a business that looks pretty interesting as we talk about an aging population and keeping connected. Sarah Lambert, welcome to CJAD.
Thanks.
Maybe let's hit the ground running. Tell us a little bit about the product. Tell us a little bit about the technology, and a little bit of what drove you to move in this direction.
Yeah, sure. So as I said, my name is Sarah Lambert. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Ora Medical. I first did a bachelor degree in physical therapy at Laval University in Quebec, and I was really passionate by rehabilitation tools, and my experience in the field make me realize that there was a huge lack of access of rehabilitation, just because people are really busy and they have such a difficulty to do their exercises at home. So the best way would be like to be always with the physical therapist. However, this is not possible right now. So I really wanted to implement a new rehabilitation method. So this way people can really do rehabilitation from home. So what we design is a smart gait trainer that really adapts in real time as the physical therapist was there. So it really mimics the session, and it is also connected with the physical therapist and all the healthcare professionals. So this way they can better track the progress from a distance.
Part of the problem with physiotherapy is it's not really considered frontline, right? So it doesn't necessarily get the medical funding. It doesn't necessarily get the proper support from the government agencies. So, there's no doubt that trying to create an environment for physical rehab is it's got to be a little bit challenging. I mean, you come up with a good idea. How do you get that into motion? What drove the process and the technology and finding a use for it?
Even if it's not like the first line, as you said, I think it's going to be. So there's a movement that physiotherapists might be at the emergency in the hospital as well. So it is something coming. Physiotherapy really has something powerful, and we can do like the first trials if it's if it's a disease that really need a huge an emergency, then we can really track it. And so I think it will be something going in the hospital soon. And for that, I think that remote rehabilitation is something that can be big, just because we know that people want to get better, and all the people with walking disabilities that don't have the power to walk, it is always something really relevant for them to practice and to gain the possibility to be able to walk again and to have an autonomy.
About what inspired you, I think back to years ago, there used to be infomercials about all these gadgets to help people who are falling. I've fallen, I can't get up is the famous line from the infomercial. Do you remember that when you were younger? Is that what helped inspire you, and where did the ideas come from?
Yeah, it was really when I was doing a physical therapy internship, I was working with children, and I really saw that there was a huge lack of access for them. So what I saw is that I had one of my patients that used his own walker, and we needed to really take his hand and to tape it with the gait trainer, and it was hurting her. So I was really aware of that, and I was like, okay, there's something inappropriate right now with all the rehabilitation tools that people use. It is really there that I saw the idea to create new tools that are more convenient for the patient.
So is your target age, are you looking at, you mentioned children, this to me looks like it's applicable across the board to any age, is that correct?
Yeah, eventually we would like to address any age, but we begin with children for our proof of concept. So we know that children have a better chance to gain the power to walk, just because they are still in development. So they are able to maybe progress in a greater time.
So would this be used as somebody recovering from an injury, or somebody who was born with a deficiency, or is this anything? I mean, where do you look at either drawing the line or saying, hey, our product works better here?
Yeah, we want to address both. So we really want to address all the people that learn to walk or just had an accident and need to learn back to walk. So we eventually will address both. We just begin with the children because we know that if they learn to walk, then they can learn faster, and we can really these people will use a wheelchair eventually, but we can delay the moment that they can use the wheelchair if they use our product that are on an early age.
So does this go into, I mean, there's a physical aspect to it. Is there a cognitive aspect to it? Maybe define a little bit how the technology works and how it helps in the rehab.
Yeah, so there's a partial weight support technology that really mimics the hands of the physiotherapist. So what I was doing when I was doing therapy is I was taking people by the hips, and I was taking vertical force. So this way there was some force taken from their legs. So this way, when it gets better, then I can really adjust the support given to their legs. And it is exactly what we want to reproduce right now. So there's really the partial weight support that adapts in real time according to the people progress, because there are some sensors on the gait trainer that can really detect the muscle fatigue. So this way we can really adapt the support according to the progress.
So is the physical therapist still needed? Is this done in front of a physical therapist? Is this done remotely on their own? Is this done, virtually? I mean, I guess I can see a whole bunch of different possible uses here, and I'm sure you've got them all nailed down. So.
Yeah, so the first thing that we want to do is to be used with physical therapy during session, but eventually we want to be used remotely as well. So our goal is really to improve the current therapy session, just because the physical therapist will have a nice tool to really use during therapy, but eventually our AI model will really be able to give recommendations when the physio is not there. My goal is really not to replace the therapy sessions, it's really to make it more often. So this way the people can practice outside of therapy as if they were with the therapist.
Yeah, I think a large part of the problem, certainly in physical therapy, is access to physical therapy itself, right? Yeah. And whether that is either enough time or a massive backlog before somebody even gets to see a physical therapist. So what you're proposing here is not only much quicker access, but more frequent access, correct?
Exactly. So with our application, people will be able to still be connected with their therapist or other therapists. It will just really, they will have a better access to a healthcare professional.
Very interesting product. It really, it's the walker of the future, I suppose, Mike, is one way to describe it. It uses AI and connected devices to support people and to basically, Sarah, is it fair to say sort of mimic the hand and the human touch of a physical therapist?
Yeah, it is exactly our goal. So by being a remote device, then we can really track the progress from a distance. And it is exactly our goal would be to do therapy session as if the therapist was there.
So it's the walker of the future, but using this AI-enabled sort of padding on the side of it, what other parts of the body are going to tackle next? I mean, is there going to be an upper body version? Are we looking at, other physical therapy aids to come?
The future is really about how the sensors that are connected to our device. So we do have 5 sensors connected, and eventually we can just take those sensors and adapt it on any other device. So it is really where we're planning to go. It's like our own walker, which name is the OMI, is just a first device, but eventually we can adapt with our own sensors on any other device. So this way, all the therapists will be able to track how their patients are going from a distance.
So you could find a way for a separated shoulder, playing hockey, I get a separated shoulder. You could find a way at some point in the future where that would be applicable there as it would be to helping walk or anything else.
That could be really cool. We do have sensors that can just take, example, the orientation of the hips. So we can just plan to do another device based on those sensors. But it is really the sensors that are connected to our app that will make it possible.
So it's the technology really is the sensors in play here. It's between the sensors and the app that are really the technological component.
Yeah, we do also, because our device includes the Homey device includes all those sensors. So with the data that are coming from those sensors, we can really take it and use our AI model to send recommendations and sends personal recommendations. So this way they can have a program that is really adapted for each patient.
I have to ask you the question. You all know in 2020 we walked our way into a pandemic where telemedicine has now become a huge component of medical practice at this point. And obviously that is going to continue to evolve. And how does this fit in? And, I'd like to say that, did you guys think of this before, or was the thought evolving based on the telemedicine experience?
When I was just a physical therapy student, I didn't mean to be like all remote. I just saw that there was a huge of access. And I was more like doing another gait trainer. But it's sure that we thought about it before when I met my co-founder, Louis Saint-Pierre. We do have, he does have a vision of like, how is the telemedicine going? And we really talked about it. And this is exactly where we want to go. It's like to still be innovative. It is one of our core values is to always be innovative and to be upfront into those technologies.
They've always said entrepreneurs is the right place at the right time. So, the evolution of where you've gone with the product and applicable to telemedicine, I think there's a huge future here. And that's why I think, Dan, your question about is this adaptable to other parts of the body here is massive. I mean, we all know the difficulty that we have getting space for physical therapy, being on site, and a whole bunch of things. So I find this fascinating, and I find the ability and the opportunities here are massive. The one question, I guess, that goes without saying, but we will talk about it anyways, is dollars, right? I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, there's a technology play here. There's dollars that are involved. As much as you'd like to say you guys, knew what you were doing, at some point, you need some money behind the exercise. What have you guys done for financing, for seed capital? Like, how do you see the enrollment here, the rollout here of the product and the use of funds?
Yeah, so to develop our first prototype, we used lots of non-dilutive fundings. So we won some grants and subsidies with our different research institutes. So it helped develop our first prototype, and then we tested it on a subject last November at the Rehabilitation Center Marie-Enfant. And just with that, it gave us lots of traction. And now we were few people invested in us, and then we can really be able to scale a little bit more with this financing. So we are able to hire full-time people that works on the development of our technology. So this way we can really do the clinical trials in 2 months. We plan to begin in 2 months. So this way we can have all the homologation process to begin to sell in 2023 if everything is going well.
You mentioned awards and some of the prizes that you won along the way. Maybe talk about a few of those and from what sources and how that helps lend credibility to the work that you're doing.
From the sources that I had, like the grants.
Yeah.
Okay, so we won. We were with the Technopole, the Transmed Tech Institute, with the researcher Laurent Balaz. So he has an expertise into the biomechanic of the walking, of the gait. And we use his lab to really saw if there was any relevancy into using our technology. So we really compared the normal walker with our own device, and we really had the opportunity to really see and validate what we wanted. And we can really see just with the pictures that all the gait training process is really improved with our device.
It's difficult because at the beginning, right, you need money, you look anywhere. But sometimes when you look back on it, the credibility of the people that you partner with go a long way in helping get off their ground. And what advice would you give somebody who's looking, who says, "Hey, somebody just wants to throw money at me"? Do you just take it, or do you be a little more discerning?
So there's a lot of subsidies. If someone has a great idea and it's based on new technology, I would really suggest to do maybe a partnership with a researcher or a research institution, because they will be able to validate if the technology is working. And this is what helped us a lot, is because our technology was validated by someone into her field. So it is something that I really suggest, and I'm really happy that we won some of those grants, because it helped for the testing of our device.
So where do you go from here? You're talking about 2023 launching. What are the steps you have between now and then that you have to hit time wise and obstacle wise?
Yeah, so I do clinical trials just because we were selling to physiotherapists first. We plan to sell our device into rehabilitation centers and to have a certain notoriety into our device and to really show that it works. That's why we were doing clinical trials. We plan to do it in partnership with some institutions such as Le CHU Saint-Justin. We plan also to maybe have a first paper that could be released soon to also get more notoriety. And this way we can have all the homologation process for Health Canada. We are a class 1 here just for the device, but for the software we will be a class 2. So it's it's a little bit longer for the class 2, but we will be able to sell the first version with a class 1 of the software as well. It will send less recommendations at first, but eventually we want to go with the full recommendations as if the physio was there. So and for that, we will be able to still sell or do our first sale in 2023.
One of the things, I guess, or the last question I have for you is, when you look at this and you say, okay, this is obviously, you're talking AI, you're talking sensors, you're talking technology. It's not necessarily going to retail at a cheap price. I mean, one of the important aspects, I guess, will be to get your way onto the accepted list within the insurance companies for our Medicare system and the private insurance. Is that a process that is in your, shall we say, in the front view of where you're going to go?
Exactly. So our goal is to be fully reimbursable here in Quebec. In US, there's other reimbursement code that we are planning to take. But the first step would be to be reimbursed here, because we still want to sell our device here first.
Sarah Lambert, CEO of Ora Medical, thanks so much. We're just going to pause and we'll have your one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur in a few moments. But first, we turn our attention to the HR space. And Mike, earlier in the program, we were talking about sort of the tension about going back to the office, the paradigm shift that needs to happen, and the fact that people are going to slowly get back to some semblance of normal. That also impacts the HR side, that impacts hiring. Are we going to continue seeing the sort of flurry of mass resignations that we've been seeing over the last couple of years, or are things calming down? Alita Eid is a senior manager with PVisio by FL. Alita, welcome back to CJD.
Thank you.
And Mike, so is it getting better? Are things calming down?
I guess better is a relative term at the end of the day. I mean, it's all a question of how you see. I think what's getting better is people's perception of the situation and how they're managing the situation. And part of that evolution is not to panic. And part of it is to make the effort for the right employees. So the Great Resignation has become the target of much documentation and across the way. And Alita, from your perspective, I mean, I'm sure you've seen the evolution of this, but maybe just give our listeners a little bit of your insight into what this massive movement and the societal component has been so far with the Great Resignation.
So from an employee perspective, we noticed that people are leaving their workplaces mainly because of non-compatible cultures or even toxic ones, for example. Also, lack of challenge, which has a direct impact on their overall sense of development, growth, accomplishment, and their mental health and well-being in general. So some or a lot of people were considering a job change for a while and needed a push. And that trend did not happen immediately after the outbreak of the pandemic, because the pandemic created a sense of uncertainty and insecurity at the beginning about people's employment and lifestyles. But so the trend became more apparent as time went by, and there was more room for us to self-reflect and have more clarity on what we want and don't want. Some are even calling it a great reevaluation of who we are and what we want in life. So people realized that the pandemic was here to stay for a while, and they were no longer able to tolerate or perform in their current work environment, and moved to places that fit their values and their new reality, and that offered them the lifestyle that they were looking for.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And we've talked about this on the program before, Dan and Alita, this whole discussion of, burnout. And, we raised the issue on one article of that burnout is not necessarily how much work you do, but rather the purpose with which you do. And Alita, I think you're really speaking to that in this, and that, the people are shifting jobs, and, they're not quitting to stay home. In many cases, they're quitting to try something new, that to reevaluate their purposes. So as an employer, and I look at this and I go, so how do I retain my team? How do I find this whole discussion of purpose and find a way to balance that with our employees?
So I think employers should continuously work on improving their methods and not just do it in response or as a reaction to departures. We do gather a lot of good information when people leave, but in general, I think the few areas that I think organizations should focus on would be, it's important for them and their leadership teams to continuously self-reflect, introspect, and assess their overall practices and identity if they want to remain the best version of themselves and create the best work environment that they can offer and build sustainability. So for companies, I would say ask yourself the question, because the message and the example do come from the top. So what is your message and what are your principles? Another key element is to review the experience offered to new and existing team members. So when was the last time that you reviewed your practices, your hiring practices, your professional development and mentoring programs, communication practices, and et cetera? And also, when you think about the environment that you provide for your team, are you happy with what you provide? Does it represent what you want to be as an organization? And are you making space for people to feel connected, heard, and engaged? I think it all comes back to the concept and foundation of a relationship, making sure that it remains healthy for both parties and that both are mutually engaged and committed.
So Alita, it's obviously the discussion of purpose and the trying to create this relationship, but there's always a lot more to the equation than that. And as much as we'd like to say that if we all found purpose at the end of the day, everything would be rosy and wonderful, we know that's not the case. There's got to be other challenges on the radar right now for employees that they have to address and deal with in order to retain the right employees.
Yes, absolutely. I think what we're dealing with right now is the general state of mind that most employees, managers, and overall population is experiencing, the feeling of being tired and disengaged. This is where our role, as all of us, is to work together to reimagine and redefine our workplace and find our sense of happiness working together again in whatever environment that we choose to work in. So for us, I think our commitment has to be to encourage and motivate each other in the practices that we decide to put forward. We have to perfect and adjust essential skills because they keep moving and changing. So we have to move with them. So important skills right now are influencing, being able to influence each other in a positive way. Change management, it's no longer just for HR or some teams in the organizations to perfect that skill, but really everyone has to become a good change manager. And that helps on the personal and professional side of things. Our communication skills, The needs and the trends are also changing nonstop. So how can we perfect and keep our skills up to date? And management skills, since we're operating in different environments, not the traditional one that we've always known. So I think lastly, I would just say we should all come together and realize and become okay with the fact that there is a new reality to the workplace and to what managing means, and try to move away from what we've done in the past, and especially not refer to, 2 years ago, we used to, it's gone. Let's think about today.
Alita Eid, HR Manager with Pvisio by FL Montreal. Thanks so much, Alita. Great advice. And as we wind down, let's turn to our guest, Sarah Lambert, CEO and co-founder of Ora Medical, and ask her, Sarah, for your one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur, please.
Yeah, so my advice would be to really talk to the more people as possible about your idea, and to really find a key opinion leader into your field to really validate if your solution or if your idea is actually a good idea. And to really not be afraid to take those people and those key opinion leader, because they will give you lots of traction, and those people can really help you with the new aspect of your device.
And Mike, another example of one of these SenTech companies, again, really being incubated, followed along by a lot of parties and researchers. It's sort of like a public-private partnership to bring companies like Ora along, and it's really encouraging to see.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see the young entrepreneurial side coming out, in the Quebec marketplace, and as we continue to move forward in a, hopefully a post-COVIDian world, or at least learning to balance and work with it, that the amount of energy and enthusiasm and opportunities that have sprouted within the Quebec and particularly the Montreal marketplace is fascinating. It's a great time from that perspective.
And the competence of entrepreneurs that Marjorie's bringing us, and that some of these startups have really in Montreal, is really, really phenomenal. So Sarah, congratulations. Great product. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you really much. Thanks for your time.
And don't forget that you can listen to over 13 years worth of these programs at today'sentrepreneur.org. You can subscribe to Today's Entrepreneur as a podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, or your favorite platform. We'll be back here next week. See you then.
This has been a production of TNKR Media. Good talk.